A quick mention here for Rolex. Rolex supports the Global Biodiversity Festival as part of its Perpetual Planet initiative. And the great thing with that, it supports people like you and I who are in the field doing science and research. And the exciting thing about doing science and research and being at the front line is that we always know that that thin, unseen, beautiful thread that exists between frontline science and global economies is now a very big deal. You know, what is it that gets you out of your tent every 3 hours to take weather samples in really appalling conditions? What is it that takes you to dive and take water samples everywhere? What does it take you to climb high trees to the canopies and study everything and get bitten half to death by insects? Well, it's your passion for the subject, but it's also this understanding that it goes somewhere. And where does it go? Well, it doesn't just go into dead old science reports that might take 16 years to publish and who's going to read them anyway. It comes into the public knowledge now, which is much simpler than it ever used to be. But once it's in that knowledge, what happens then? Where are the actions? And there's one group that's doing a really great thing with it, and it's the Finance for Biodiversity group, because they celebrate that thread as much as I do. And they know that the only way to protect biodiversity and look after our health and sustainability is to restructure and completely reorganize and make the best of our financial institutions. So this is the team that are leading the way through to global economy. I interviewed some of them and we've prepared a video. And Joe Grabowski, if you wouldn't mind running that video, please. Thanks very much.
We call on the global leaders
to agree on effective measures
to reverse nature loss in this decade.
Biodiversity loss is a major issue for our planet and our societies. The disruption of ecosystems can result in critical problems.
If production methods and diets do not change, humanity could face catastrophic environmental, political, and social consequences.
We are totally convinced that biodiversity is an absolute necessity if we want to continue to develop our civilization.
We therefore commit to the
by 2024 at the latest.
Collaborating and sharing knowledge.
Engage with companies.
Assess impact.
Set targets.
and report publicly.
Mirova is one of the 26 financial institutions that launched the Finance for Biodiversity Pledge in September 2020. It is an honor for me to announce today that we are now a group of 55 signatories financial institutions with a total assets of over 9 trillion euros. By signing the pledge, financial institutions not only call upon world leaders to reverse natural loss this decade, but also commit to take ambitious measures via our investments and finance activities through 5 commitments. Start collaborating, engaging with companies on biodiversity, assessing our own biodiversity impact, setting targets, and reporting on biodiversity matters by 2024 at the latest. I know it's a challenge for all of us, but a collapse of biodiversity we are facing calls for urgent action. We already have the ability to foster investment in biodiversity-friendly investments in the listed world through green stocks and green bonds, but also by investing directly at farm, forest, and ocean level, as we do with our natural capital division. Yes, biodiversity impact is hard to measure, but data providers are willing to innovate if investors ask for new types of data. This is what we did last year with 3 other French asset managers, which led to a partnership with the data provider Iceberg Data Lab to create new types of data on biodiversity. By working all together through the Finance for Biodiversity Pledge or other initiatives such as the TNFD, I'm confident that we will be able to find new ways to accelerate the shift toward a more sustainable economy. It is an important year for biodiversity. Coming October 2021, the Convention on Biodiversity, COP15, will take place in Kunming, China. a key moment for global biodiversity as world leaders will gather and discuss measures to halt biodiversity loss and the adoption of hopefully a new deal for nature and people that sets concrete goals and targets to conserve global biodiversity. Biodiversity action by financial institutions is very important. All businesses depend on or impact biodiversity via ecosystem services and other natural capital assets. Biodiversity loss has an impact on the economy and therefore also on businesses and the financial sector. By signing the pledge, we show our responsibilities as financial institutions to reverse nature loss. I therefore encourage other financial institutions to sign as well and welcome the 15 new pledge signatories.
There is a beautiful unseen thread that connects our science fieldwork, people in tents, people at sea, people in the desert, people up in jungle canopies, you name it. And that thread connects us in the field all the way back to what drives global economies. And I love to think of that thread, particularly when times are tough and you think, what are we doing this for? Ah, it's another water sample. Ah, it's another weather observation. How many do we need? And the value of that long-term data set is immeasurable. We must always remember that, particularly when we think about how it connects and drives our global economies. Well, to help us understand all that, I'm delighted to be joined by Clarice. Clarice Simonek from Ossium is here to help us decode it, understand it, and tell us what it's going to look like in the future. So, hello, Clarice, come on in.
Hi, Paul. Thank you very much. And it's a
Thank
true
you,
pleasure to be
Clarice.
here.
So how do we take the enthusiasm and the energy for people like me in the field and begin to completely understand how our work really is essential and helps to drive global economies?
It's a fascinating question because, to be honest, it's what drives me to do what I do. And I think it goes to the understanding of what is sustainable development. Because if we think of it not as the encounter of environment, society, and economics, but really three circles that fit in each other. So, you know, in the bigger sphere, you find the economy, in which our society is inscribed and completely dependent on. And then in that little middle, you have the economy and actually the financial markets where I work. So for me, it's understanding that dependency between one and the other, especially the middle one to the one outer to it, that we really see that beautiful thread that you talked about so eloquently. And for me, it's really this dependency that we have as investors of a stable environment, of a thriving society, that we see the returns of that particular company that we invested in, but also the market returns. And those two really make up the return that we are able to provide to savers, right? That we so much depend on in the later days of our lives.
That's great, Clarice. Thank you, because it feels to me like we're at a time of unprecedented opportunity. I mean, we're all driven by finance. We want money to work. We need an economy that's sustainable in all senses. But that's a great motivator. You know, I always dreamed of investments that we would, I don't know, we'd go to the bank or go to the mortgage company or go to an investment company and say, wow, this looks great because it's safe. The returns look good, it's dead easy, and it just happens to be the right thing to do. It just happens to be the greenest or the bluest or most sustainable investment, rather than pitch up and pick something that looks a bit unsafe, looks a bit hairy, doesn't return much, and just doing it because it's green. That's obviously the wrong thing. Plus, on top of that, we're in the thick of a pandemic. You know, we've recognized that this pandemic arrived because of our out of balance relationship with nature. We're fortunate we've got vaccines now that come from science, but you know, the only true vaccine against future pandemics is to redress that balance, reset our values. So it really does feel, and I mean, as an explorer, I'm bound to use an analogy, something to do with adventure or exploration, but it does feel like the beginning of a great exploration, a great expedition. You know, it's new territory, there's an uncertain route, and there's a hope of great rewards. I mean, this is the perfect time for us to be motivated and excited by conservation markets. So we've never needed you and your colleagues any more than we do today.
And, you know, I think expedition is an interesting metaphor here, because one of the things that I've constantly talking about when people ask, you know, do we have enough data out there, right? Do we know enough to know where we're going? And I think one of the things that really strikes me and at times frustrates me is we human beings were constantly making decisions on imperfect data. And I think exploration is perfect for that, right? Because I'm Brazilian, so I think of you know, Cabral making his way over and discovering the continent. But if he were waiting for perfect information, he wouldn't, you know, he wouldn't have made it ever, right? So it's there's a difference between perfect science and the certainty of the direction that we want to go to. And I think when you're thinking of that exploration, you know, you tell me, but you have a little bit of the science, right? We understand the science behind climate, although the numbers are imperfect. We understand now increasingly better the impact that you know, deforestation and the harm to biodiversity causes, you know, to society, to humans, especially with COVID that you mentioned, to our economy. So I don't think that we need to sit down and wait for the perfect number to the decimal point to start to act and say, all right, I can shift my boat, you know, from here to here, despite the fact that I don't know exactly what longitude, you know, I'm supposed to be at. So I think it's a great metaphor.
Brilliant. Music to my ears, Clarice. Thank you so much. Because yes, we always say that thing, there's lots of perfectly seaworthy boats that are still tied to the dock and won't go anywhere because they're not quite ready. They're not got quite the latest gizmos on board and all that. And yes, we've got enough data to make smart decisions now. And so to get the right decisions made, such as 30 by 30, it's energizing, isn't it, when we look at the big global commitment to protect 30% of the planet by 2030. I forget how many countries are signed up to it, but it's like 50 something. And even better, it's brought to life E.O. Wilson's Half Earth campaign, you know, 30 by 30, which is agreed by scientists as being the minimum we should protect for a truly sustainable life, is seen as a waypoint to 50 by 50, you know, 50% by 2050, E.O. Wilson's Half Earth. So all of those dreams are coming to life. And as you well said, we do have enough data. And it's brilliant. The we have enough data line comes from Clarice, who's in the investment business, so it couldn't be better. But it's just now getting to that point where the political will follows it. And I hope that voting, I mean, you know, people are in positions of authority and influence because people typically vote for them, whether it's chief execs or politicians or whoever. And I'm thinking that with the young ones coming up, who are so aware of nature-based solutions and the value of being close to nature and resetting all those are the ones that are going to be voting soon, and they'll be asking those questions of values. You know, before people vote, they'll say, well, okay, they may belong to certain parties or have certain academic qualifications, but what are their nature-based values? Where do they fit? And so once the people in influence realize that they're going to be voted on their values for nature, I think that's going to really change things. So to get between here and there, what do you think our next steps should be? I mean, you know, you're talking to a man here who's normally in the polar regions or in the deep sea. And there's a lot of people watching who won't be financial experts, but what can we all do now to help get between where we are today, the need for it, and where we will be in the soon tomorrows, where nature-based solutions and, you know, conservation marketplaces are the norm?
I think that you mentioned voting, and there are different ways of voting, right? When the client of a financial product chooses one product as opposed to the other due to the impact that, you know, the companies in that product, that, you know, the companies that are being invested in, the impact that they have in the environment and the economy, and in the society, that is a way to vote, right? You're voting for a future that is hopefully providing you with better returns, but also providing you with a better environment and a better society. So that's a way to vote, you know, to have your say, to have your money reflect your values. There's a way to vote as well that is our way to vote as investors, right? We are owners of companies, and every year we're asked to vote on, has the chair of that company considered the impact that that company has on environment and society? Has that company, you know, reduced the risk of modern slavery, of the influence that it has on its supply chain, to consider their impact on biodiversity, etc. So we certainly as well have a big responsibility with regards to voting. And you know, I won't go down the political side, but there's certainly a lot that we can all do there, not just in terms of voting, but sharing with you know, different realms of governance the importance that it is for us to have, in my view, some sort of an equivalent to a Paris Agreement, right? Because the science is there, but at many times it's required for governments as well to share the political will, for companies, for the investment, for the financial sector to advance and to say, this is the direction we're heading, right? For me, the government is always the steering wheel, right? The driver of that car. Finance is the fuel, right? We provide what the economy needs to get us forward, going in that direction. But if governments say that's where we're going, then everyone can follow. So I think that's also a great way that governments can contribute, and those voting can contribute, for us to get a very clear sense of what North is.
Yeah, fantastic. It's great. Again, it's great to hear you say that, Clarice, because yes, that's how we can all feel part of a big solution during our normal daily lives. When we go and buy a car, or buy insurance, or houses, or buy, you know, anything, you know, energy, it's good for us to know that the values are displayed clearly, and we go, that's why we buy it. And then, of course, the manufacturers and the producers realize that we're all smart, and it must lead to a more balanced planet. And I keep hearing about this thing about a biodiversity finance facility as a dream for the future. So this feels very much like the beginning of an expedition. There's all this material out there and hopes, which are like waypoints or lighthouses on a brand new journey. So it's an exciting place to be for those of us who like to travel and like to be at the front line and like to be aware and like to feel connected with smart conservation decisions. And I think it couldn't go better than having you join us, Clarice, with your commitment to it. And, you know, who knows, part of the great dream is to get you and your colleagues in the front line with us on one of our next big expeditions. You can't go wrong with that. Pretty easy for us to walk into a bank and just sort of look at things. We don't understand what's going on.
It's the equivalent, isn't it?
It is. But it'd be brilliant to have you and your team join us. And we should do that maybe. You know, who knows, maybe at the next Global Biodiversity Festival, instead of it being online, it's real. And you've got a bunch of us hanging around in the financial institutions and a bunch of you visiting us on the front line, so we can share experiences. Well, thank you, Clarice, for joining us. It's absolutely brilliant. And I'll leave any final words to you. So over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think it's a journey that the financial industry is going through, but certainly one that individuals like you that take back the science, that take back the measures, we can advance in a much faster way that we did with climate, to ensure that we're within the realms of the planetary boundaries that we should all be respecting.
Great. Thanks, Clarice. See you in an investment bank or in the field somewhere very soon, I hope.
Or
Thanks
in the
very
field.
much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Hi again, everybody. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by Will Mcdonald from Aviva. And my life as an explorer is spent collecting data, usually from remote places at the end of the world's longest supply chains. And as I collect that data with my colleagues, I often wonder where it's going. Is it really driving global economies? What difference is this data making? Well, of course, we know now it is. And it's thanks to people like Will and his team at Aviva that it does make a difference. And that's the kind of thing that keeps us going. So come on, Will, please join me.
Hello, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing absolutely great, and thanks for joining us from what looks like a car.
It's a plug-in hybrid, so a step in the right direction.
Thank heavens that you're in a plug-in car. And it's great. Well, look, thanks very much for joining us. We know you're super busy, and as I said in my introduction, Will, those of us that work at the front line of science, we collect data. And it's so motivating to understand. It's been driving all of my life that every time we get out of that tent and the conditions are horrible and we've got to take a weather observation every 3 hours, or we're rolling around at sea in brutal conditions, or diving and climbing in places where you wouldn't go on holiday, but you sort of go for the work, that data is connected to global economies and indeed drives global economies by this amazingly beautiful, unseen, often uncelebrated thread. And that's what keeps us going. But at the end of that thread is you and your colleagues doing great work. So it's so wonderful to meet you. I feel that it's a bit of a sort of a meeting of the species. You know, you're there driving global economies, and I've pitched up from the field covered in frost with my knuckles dragging on the ground, saying, it's great to meet you. I'm the man who brings you the numbers. How's it going?
Yeah, well, we are, we try our hardest to do, the best with what we can. I think what's really clear about biodiversity and the nature and stuff is that, we're never going to have all the data. We're only just understanding how trees talk to each other, how long those relationships are. We're only just understanding, how quickly oceans can regenerate, So the more we can understand what those processes are, the better we can focusing our attention on trying to help them.
Because, you're right to talk about the data. Thank you. I love it. You said we're never going to have enough data, because that keeps people like me in business. But of course, we must have it. We always say, don't we, Will, that we've probably got enough data now to really make some smart decisions. That must be the case.
I think the parallel that gets drawn quite a lot is with climate, say, and now with climate, we've got regulatory standards that drive. We have metrics that we can all agree on. We are entering a period of a kind of normalization of reporting. The expectations are pretty set on what we know and what we can do. We don't know what the answers are. We don't know what all the metrics are. We don't know exactly how we're going to deliver it all, but we know exactly what we know enough. And I think with biodiversity, what we need to do is not wait for any more. We certainly know enough that we have got a huge problem on our hands. And I also think we know enough to know that we can do something about it.
Great to hear, Will.
I think, if I just say a company like Aviva, I guess our main role here is people save their pensions, they save up over their lifetimes and they entrust that money to us. And our job is to invest it so it grows, so they've got something to retire into. But, do they have a planet, a world they want to retire into in kind of 20, 30, 40 years? If the investments, their own savings are going into trashing a planet, that means when they retire, they'll probably have they might well have a worse standard of living. So we are long-term stewards. We're coming up to our, I think, 325th anniversary as a company. And we, it's constantly changing what we know and what we can do with your money, with, other people's money, and how we can make that work, what change we can drive and what role we have. And that's why I do the job. It's really exciting. And the possibilities are endless.
Couldn't be better, Will. It's great to hear that, real music to my ears, because I've often thought, I do arrive at those ESG conferences, and I am the man from the front line using that story. And obviously, you were all reacting to the great IPBES report a couple of years ago, the Das Gupta report now, and of course, the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which really brought sharply to everyone's focus that we do need to redress our balance with nature. And I've often thought that good investments, sustainable investments, should be, as you described, easy, safe, reliable, with good returns, and then just happen to be the best thing to do, the right thing to do. So that's a lovely feeling. And as you described, you know, your leadership in this means that people can plan financially and just happen to be doing the right thing to the planet. You don't have to wear a hair shirt. You can do well and celebrate and actually do the right thing to the planet. I think that's an excellent approach.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think what we can do as a business and an industry is look at how we can best help our customers. Like, there's no doubt that people, you know, given an easy option to do something, you know, where they understand the risks and the rewards, you know, within an appropriately regulated framework, because this is an important topic. This is someone's life savings. You know, they should take it seriously. But I think given all that, you know, will people take the option to invest in a better future, not just in the kind of status quo? Then yeah, I think they will. But our job is to make that easy, accessible, you know, and possible.
Fantastic, Will. I was at Davos last year, which feels like a lifetime ago, and I was so excited to hear the news that ESG and other sustainable investments were outperforming all of the more, you know, traditional unsustainable investments. And that was just a great thing to hear. So between that and the Great Reset, and let's face it, you know, COVID has given us an opportunity to redress the way we do things. So it does feel like we're in a real sweet spot. And with you and your team's leadership, I mean, here's a man sitting in a hybrid car who's stopped to speak to us today. You know, that's a bit of commitment as well, Will. But it's brilliant. And all we can hope for next is that one day you'll join us in the field, somewhere exciting at the front line, so you can see where the data comes from more. And who knows, one day I'll come up to your place and I can stare at your computer screens and sheets that I don't understand and get a sense for how it actually magically works.
I don't think I would impose that on you, but I would love to join you out in the field. I volunteer one day a week as a ranger for a charity here in the UK, just to get outside. I love it. So I would much rather be with you in your field. But obviously, you're always welcome at the office.
Great stuff, Will. It's a deal. Let's go somewhere exciting as soon as we can. Thanks very much, Will, for joining us. Keep up the great work. And just to finish, you know, inviting everybody to join this project, you know, more signatories to join us for a next celebration in September, please. And Will, it really great to connect today. And I hope your journey continues well and your car's fully charged up and you've got some decent food in that car.
I do. I've got my peanut butter sandwiches. I've got a destination, which is greenery and nature. So I'm not really sure what could go wrong.
Will, keep up the great work. Brilliant to see you. See you somewhere exciting next. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Paul. Thank you.
Well, there you go, everybody. In a perfect world, we would have had the whole of the Finance for Biodiversity signatories and all the pledge makers and all the banks and supporters right here with us so that we could all feel the energy, ask them those difficult questions and celebrate the fact that this is a new beginning. It really does. I said in those chats that it feels like a big start of a big expedition. And believe me, that's exactly what it feels like to me, because as I grew up, I didn't hear about things called sustainable finance or ESG investing or natural capital or any of these things. Who ever heard of those? But now we do. And the great thing is they rely on field data and field science, and that's our work. So every single photograph, every single science sample, everything that we do links firmly to global economies. And that really is a whole new beginning for everybody. So I love the work they're doing, and it's something that we should all celebrate. They've got a great website. Do go onto it. And it's the Finance for Biodiversity, and that links all through to all of their pledges and all of the other detail. And you'll be hearing more about that subject from two more speakers coming up through the festival. We've got Justin Mundy in conversation and also Kristin Reschberger in conversation. So that's a great theme for us to have to share on this great platform.